The war had raged for years. The Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of alien civilizations, had long dismissed humanity as an upstart species, dangerous in its unpredictability, but ultimately outmatched by superior technology and numbers. From the moment Earth had joined the galactic stage, it had been seen as a minor threat, an irritation to be swatted away. And yet, time and time again, humanity refused to break. Earth's military forces had held their ground, proving to be far more resilient than expected. What should have been a swift and decisive campaign turned into a prolonged conflict filled with bitter battles, desperate victories, and humiliating defeats for the Council's forces. The aliens had lost fleets, planets, and thousands of soldiers to what they considered primitive humans. The war should have ended years ago, but it hadn't. And now, the Council was determined to finish it. Their plan was simple: wipe out key human military units, weaken their infrastructure, and deliver a final, crushing blow to the Terran forces. High-value human targets had been marked for elimination, and one such target was a Special Forces unit operating on the fringe of Council-controlled space, a team of elite American soldiers responsible for some of the most devastating sabotage operations against the Council's war efforts. The humans had been a thorn in their side for too long. It was time to cut it out. Sergeant Dean Callahan adjusted his rifle scope, scanning the terrain ahead. The landscape was barren, a wasteland of jagged rocks and shifting sand. The wind howled across the surface, kicking up dust storms that reduced visibility to near zero. It was a perfect place for a stealth operation, hostile, remote, and almost completely uninhabited. Perfect, except for the fact that they weren't alone. His team, composed of 6 highly trained operators, had infiltrated the planet to sabotage a key Council outpost. The mission had gone smoothly at first. Silent movement through enemy territory, careful placement of explosives, exfiltration plans mapped out in detail. Then, everything went to hell. The first sign of trouble had been the comms blackout. Their encrypted communications went dead, cutting them off from mission control. Then the drones went offline. Seconds later, the sky above them lit up with fire as Council warships descended like vultures, deploying ground forces in overwhelming numbers. It was an ambush. And Callahan's team was the prey. Move. Move. We're compromised. Callahan's voice cut through the chaos as plasma fire rained down from above. His team sprinted across the rocky terrain, seeking cover as explosions erupted around them. The air was thick with smoke and debris, the ground shaking with the impact of incoming fire. They had no time to ask how the Council had known they were here. No time to figure out who had betrayed them or what had gone wrong. The only thing that mattered was survival. Private Harris, the youngest member of the squad, screamed as a plasma bolt struck him in the back, sending him crashing to the ground. Callahan didn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. His breath came in ragged bursts as he slid behind a boulder, raising his rifle and returning fire. Council soldiers in advanced combat armor were advancing in coordinated formations, their weapons cutting through the darkness like blue lightning. It was a slaughter. One by one, his men fell. Corporal Vasquez took a shot to the chest, his armor burning away as he collapsed in a heap. Sergeant Moore went down trying to cover their retreat, his body torn apart by a barrage of plasma rounds. Callahan kept moving, his mind running on pure survival instinct. He leaped over a ridge, his boots skidding against loose gravel as he hit the ground hard. He could hear the alien voices behind him, cold, calculating, confident. They knew they had won. A plasma round struck him in the side, sending a searing pain through his body. He staggered, his vision swimming. His rifle slipped from his grasp, clattering against the rocks. And then, darkness. When Callahan woke, the first thing he noticed was the silence. His body was a mess of pain, his ribs ached, his leg was stiff, and the wound in his side burned like fire. He tried to move but found himself barely able to shift. His armor was cracked, and blood stained the ground beneath him. Slowly, reality set in. He was alive. But he was alone. His team was gone, either dead or captured. The enemy had left the bodies where they fell, weapons scattered among the rocks. Plasma burns still smoldered against the earth, the scent of death thick in the air. Callahan gritted his teeth. They had left him. Not out of mercy, but out of arrogance. The Council's commanders must have assumed he was too wounded to survive. They hadn't even bothered to finish him off. Why waste ammunition on a dead man walking? He let out a bitter, pained laugh. They should have killed him. Because if they thought he was going to lie down and die, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Summoning what little strength he had, Callahan dragged himself toward the nearest fallen soldier, a fellow American, his face frozen in an expression of pain. He forced himself to ignore the grief threatening to break him. No time for that. Survival first. Revenge later. With trembling fingers, he scavenged what he could. A knife. A half-full medkit. A ration pack. A sidearm with only a few shots left. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to get started. The sky above was empty now, the council forces long gone. They had taken what they wanted. Claimed their victory. Moved on. And that was their mistake. They thought this was over. They thought the war had ended here, on this barren rock, with the death of Callahan's team. But Callahan wasn't dead. Not yet. He clenched his jaw as he patched his wounds, fighting through the pain. He bit down on a strip of cloth as he cauterized a plasma wound, his body convulsing from the shock. The pain kept him focused. The rage kept him alive. And as he stood, shaking, barely able to keep his balance, he made a silent vow. The Galactic Council had left him to die. Now, they were going to regret it. Death had stalked him through the wasteland. Dean Callahan should have died on that ridge. He was wounded, exhausted, and alone. He had no backup, no way off the planet, and no allies to call for help. His team was gone, slaughtered in an ambush that had turned their mission into a massacre. He had been left behind, assumed dead by the Galactic Council's forces. But he wasn't dead. And if the aliens thought he would quietly lie down and accept his fate, they had no idea what kind of monster they had just unleashed. The first few hours after regaining consciousness had been a blur of agony. Every breath sent sharp pain through his ribs, the plasma wound in his side still burning with the sickening heat of cauterized flesh. His right leg was stiff, the tendons screaming in protest whenever he tried to put weight on it. He could barely stand, much less fight. But Callahan didn't waste time feeling sorry for himself. Survival was a mindset, a state of being. Pain didn't mean shit. Fear didn't mean shit. Living, that was all that mattered. He had already scavenged the dead for whatever supplies he could carry. The pistol holstered at his side only had 3 shots left. The knife strapped to his belt was razor-sharp, but it wouldn't do much against the Council's advanced armor. The emergency ration pack he found in his fallen squadmate's gear was barely enough to last a day. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Callahan had 2 options: stay in place and wait to die or move. He chose the latter. The landscape was unforgiving. Razor-edged cliffs jutted out like the bones of some long-dead beast, their jagged forms casting deep shadows across the rocky ground. The wind howled through the valleys, carrying the distant echoes of creatures unseen. The air was thin, dry, laced with particles of dust that stuck to the back of his throat like ash. The planet, designated RX-199 in the Council's databases, was an uninhabitable wasteland. It had no major settlements, no lush ecosystems, no resources worth exploiting. The Council only maintained a presence here because of its strategic location, an outpost used for refueling ships and monitoring human activity in the region. That outpost was his objective. The only place on this entire godforsaken rock where he could find food, water, weapons, and, most importantly, a way off the planet. But getting there wasn't going to be easy. He estimated the outpost was at least 30 miles away, positioned on the far side of a canyon range filled with unpredictable weather, hostile alien wildlife, and, if he was unlucky, enemy patrols. In his current condition, it might as well have been 1,000 miles. But Callahan had never backed down from a challenge before. And he wasn't about to start now. The first night was hell. The temperature dropped to below freezing, the warmth of the twin suns replaced by a bone-chilling cold that sapped the strength from his muscles and gnawed at his wounds. With no shelter, he was forced to burrow into the side of a rocky outcropping, using what little insulation he had to keep from freezing to death. Sleep was impossible. His body was too wrecked, his mind too wired. He could still hear the screams of his squad echoing in his head, their last moments replaying over and over like a twisted recording. Harris, the youngest, begging for help as his body convulsed from plasma burns. More, emptying his last magazine into the enemy before being torn apart. Vasquez, screaming at him to run. Guilt threatened to eat him alive. But he didn't have time for that. Regret didn't bring back the dead. Only revenge could make things right. By the third day, Callahan was running on fumes. His emergency rations were gone, his body was on the brink of collapse, and dehydration was setting in. His wound had become infected, and the fever burning through his skull made it harder and harder to focus. But he was close. Through the scope of a stolen alien rifle, he could see the lights of the Council outpost glimmering in the distance, a collection of metallic structures reinforced with energy shields and watchtowers. Getting inside would be suicide. But he wasn't planning on walking through the front gate. Callahan had been trained for this. Special forces didn't just teach you how to fight. They taught you how to survive, how to improvise, how to hunt. And right now, he was the predator. The Council? They were just prey. The first step was reckon. Callahan spent the next 24 hours observing enemy movements, watching how the patrols operated. The outpost was guarded by a squad of Fainari, one of the Council's most elite soldier species. 7-foot-tall humanoids with elongated limbs, enhanced vision, and reflexes faster than any human. Tough bastards. But not invincible. Callahan had seen plenty of Fainari die before, and he was about to add a few more to the list. He made his move at night. The wind had picked up, turning the canyon into a storm of swirling dust and debris. Perfect cover. Callahan slid through the darkness like a ghost, moving with slow, deliberate steps. He had fashioned a crude spear from a broken piece of his armor, wrapping the tip with a serrated edge of alien plating. Not ideal, but it would do the job. The first sentry never saw it coming. Callahan's knife punched through the back of the Fainari skull, silencing him before he could make a sound. He dragged the corpse into the shadows, stripping the body of its gear. A pulse rifle. A communicator. Now he was armed. Now he was dangerous. The next two guards died just as easily. One fell to a suppressed shot to the throat, the other to a blade across the femoral artery. Callahan moved methodically, dismantling the enemy presence piece by piece. By the time the Council realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Their ghost had come for them, and he wasn't leaving until every last one of them was dead. The Galactic Council thought they had wiped him out. They thought one wounded human alone on a wasteland planet was no longer a threat. They thought wrong. Dean Callahan had spent the last 72 hours crawling through the dirt, surviving on nothing but sheer willpower and a thirst for revenge. Now, he was inside the Council's outpost, armed, dangerous, and ready to make them pay. And by the time he was done, the Council wouldn't just regret leaving him alive. They'd fear the very idea of crossing humanity ever again. The first kill. Callahan crouched behind a stack of supply crates, pulse rifle clutched tight in his hands. He controlled his breathing, slowing his heart rate. The Fainari patrol moved with the kind of arrogance only elite warriors possessed. 4 soldiers. Tall. Lanky. Their armor shimmered under the artificial lights of the outpost. They weren't even moving cautiously. They thought they were untouchable. That was their first mistake. The second was turning their backs to the shadows. Callahan didn't waste time. He moved like a phantom, his knife flashing under the dim lights. The first alien never made a sound, just a quick twist of the blade under its jaw, severing its vocal cords before it collapsed. The second had time to turn, his 4 glowing eyes widening in surprise, just before Callahan shoved the blade into his throat and ripped it sideways. Blood sprayed against the wall. The other 2 turned, one reaching for his communicator, the other raising his weapon. Callahan was faster. He rolled into cover as a pulse round missed his head by inches. The moment his back hit the crate, he popped up and squeezed the trigger. The Fainaris had exploded in a spray of blue gore. The last one panicked. Bad move. Callahan was on him before he could scream, slamming his rifle butt into the alien's face. The Fainari staggered back, disoriented, before Callahan grabbed him by the throat and twisted hard. A sickening crack echoed in the night air. Then, silence. 4 Council soldiers. Dead in seconds. Callahan took their weapons, their gear, and their comms. Now he could listen in. Now, the hunt truly began. Spreading fear. He used the comms to monitor enemy chatter. The Council forces hadn't noticed the missing patrol yet, but it was only a matter of time. Callahan needed to be smart. He wasn't just going to kill them, he was going to make them afraid. Because fear was a weapon just as deadly as a sniper's bullet. He dragged the full bodies into a supply room and arranged them carefully. He posed them, arms reaching toward the security cameras, mouths locked in silent screams. Then, using a stolen plasma torch, he burned a message into the steel wall. 3 words. You left me. Then, he waited. And when the next patrol stumbled onto the scene, their screams echoed through the entire outpost. Panic spread like wildfire. The Council's response. Callahan eavesdropped as the officers barked orders over the comms. This is Captain Zhao Ren. All units, report. We have a breach. Intruder confirmed inside the facility. Impossible. No ships have landed. No life signs detected. Then explain the bodies. Survivors, perhaps? Scavengers. There's no scavenger on this rock that could do that. Callahan smirked. They didn't know who they were dealing with yet. But they would. Setting the traps. With the outpost in chaos, Callahan used it to his advantage. He rigged the supply depot with explosives made from stolen fuel cells. A tripwire grenade in the hallway. A booby-trapped weapon rack. One by one, the enemy fell into his web. A squad rushed into the supply depot, only for the entire building to erupt in flames. A soldier tried to grab a rifle, only for the gun to detonate in his hands, taking his entire unit with him. Another patrol moved through the corridors, only for the tripwire to slice through their bodies like a razor wire trap. It wasn't just about killing them. It was about breaking them, turning their base into his hunting ground. And it was working. The enemy adapts. The Council officers finally realized what was happening. This isn't a random attack, Captain Zhao Ren growled over the comms. This is tactical. Someone is hunting us. The outpost went into lockdown. Doors sealed shut. Automated defenses activated. Drones were deployed. But it didn't matter. Because they were locked in with him. Callahan used the vents, the maintenance tunnels, the hidden pathways they had forgotten about. He moved like a ghost. He struck from the shadows. He was no longer just a soldier. He was vengeance. The last stand. After hours of bloodshed, only a handful of Council officers remained. They had barricaded themselves inside the command center, desperate, terrified. And Callahan? He was right outside the door. Stay alert. He's coming, one of the officers shouted, gripping his weapon with trembling hands. But Callahan was already inside. A plasma blade punched through the first officer's chest. The second tried to run, only for Callahan to put 2 rounds into his back. Captain Zhao Ren, the last one standing, stared at him in horror. You're dead, the alien whispered. You were supposed to be dead. Callahan leveled his rifle at the captain's head. Yeah, he said coldly. That's what you all thought. Then he pulled the trigger. A single shot. A final message. And just like that, the outpost belonged to him. What comes next? The Galactic Council had made a critical mistake. They had left him to die. Now he had their base, their weapons, their ships, and the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Captain Zhao Ren's corpse lay sprawled across the command center, a single bullet hole between his 4 alien eyes. Dean Callahan exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle. The outpost was his now. But he wasn't done. The Galactic Council had abandoned him, left him to rot on this wasteland. They had murdered his team, laughed at the idea of a wounded human surviving against their elite forces. Now, he was going to ban their entire operation to the ground, securing the outpost. Callahan worked fast. The Council had assumed the outpost was impenetrable. Walls of reinforced alloy, automated turrets, a fleet of hovercraft for patrols. But they had built it for an invasion, not for a ghost. And Callahan was their ghost. First, he looted the bodies. Extra magazines, rations, explosives. Anything useful. Then, he pulled up the outpost schematics from the command terminal. Communications, defenses, vehicle hangars, security overrides. He mapped every system, pinpointing what to sabotage and what to weaponize. He wasn't just taking their base. He was turning it into a trap. The message. Before he wiped out their systems, he had one last thing to do. He activated the emergency distress beacon. Council fleets would receive the signal in minutes. They'd send reinforcements. More soldiers. That was exactly what Callahan wanted. But before shutting it off, he recorded a message. A warning. A declaration. The holographic feed flickered to life, broadcasting directly to the Galactic Council's nearest warships. Callahan leaned in, his face still streaked with dried blood, his cold blue eyes burning with a predator's focus. "You left me to die," he said, his voice low, controlled. Deadly. A pause. "But I didn't die." The camera panned slightly to the bodies of the slain Feynari officers, lined up against the wall, their own weapons strapped across their chests in an eerie, unnatural display. "You took my team from me," Callahan continued. "So I took your men from you." He held up the captain's rank insignia, a bloodstained council emblem, before dropping it to the floor. "I'm not trapped here with you." He smirked. "You're trapped here with me." Then, he cut the feed. The hunt was about to begin. Preparing the battlefield. Callahan set his traps with ruthless precision. He knew the Council's response would be fast and overwhelming. They'd send dropships, mechs, entire squads of Feynari commandos. Good. That just meant more bodies for the pile. He planted explosives along the landing pads, hidden beneath loose debris. The moment the dropships touched down, fire and steel. He sabotaged the outpost's automated turrets, rewiring their friend or foe recognition. Now, the moment the reinforcements arrived, the very defenses meant to protect them would turn on their own men. The hallways were laced with tripwires, plasma traps, and strategically placed fuel cells. Any squad trying to move in tight formation would be walking into a death funnel. By the time he was done, the outpost wasn't a military base anymore. It was a slaughterhouse. The reinforcements arrived. Hours passed. Then, they came. Callahan watched from the shadows as the first wave of dropships descended from the sky, sleek silver hulls gleaming against the twin suns. At least 50 Feynari commandos. He smirked. They had no idea they were about to step into hell. The moment the first dropship's landing gear touched the ground, boom. A massive explosion ripped through the pad, engulfing the entire squad in fire. The second ship tried to divert. Too late. A chain reaction of detonations tore through the outpost defenses, throwing shockwaves of debris into the sky. Panic erupted. "We're under attack. The defenses are compromised. Get to cover." Then the turrets activated. Callahan watched as the Council's own automated defenses turned against them, spitting streams of red-hot plasma into the ranks of confused Feynari soldiers. Some tried to retreat, only to trigger the second wave of traps. A cluster of mines hidden beneath a pile of bodies detonated, sending alien limbs and scorched armor flying. The entire first wave of reinforcements was gone in under 5 minutes. Callahan reloaded his rifle. Now, it was time to finish the rest. Close quarters carnage. The surviving Feynari, maybe a dozen, tried to regroup inside the outpost. Mistake. Callahan knew every corridor, every blind spot, every kill zone. He moved through the base like a ghost, striking from the shadows. A soldier rounded a corner. Callahan's knife punched through his throat before he could scream. Another squad set up behind cover. Callahan dropped a grenade into their barricade, reducing them to smoldering husks. One tried to beg for mercy. Callahan shot him in the head without hesitation. They hadn't shown his team mercy. They didn't deserve it either. The final commander, the last council officer, tried to flee. A high-ranking official, judging by the ornate armor, probably the one leading the reinforcements. Callahan found him in the communications tower, frantically trying to send a distress call. The officer turned, his breath hitching in pure terror as Callahan stepped forward, rifle raised. Please," the alien stammered, dropping his weapon. I can make you a deal." The council. Callahan fired. A single shot. Straight through the alien's skull. No deals. No negotiations. Just justice. The Galactic Council's true regret. The outpost was in ruins. The reinforcements were dead. And Callahan? Callahan wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was an executioner. But he wasn't done. The Galactic Council's true mistake wasn't leaving him to die. It was underestimating what happens when you push a human too far. Now, he wasn't just getting off this planet. He was taking the war to them. And he was going to make them pay. The outpost was a graveyard. Smoke curled into the sky, thick with the scent of burning alien flesh. Bodies, scorched, mutilated, left in grotesque displays, lined the shattered corridors. The once pristine walls were riddled with bullet holes, blood splatters, and the charred remains of what used to be elite council soldiers. Dean Callahan stood in the center of it all, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes cold and calculating. He had done more than just survive. He had eradicated every last one of them. And now, he was taking the fight straight to the Galactic Council. Hijacking the warship, Callahan moved toward the hangar bay, stepping over the corpses of the lost reinforcements. One of the dropships had survived his ambush, a sleek, Council-class infiltrator vessel with active stealth systems. Perfect. He bought it quickly, tossing aside the body of the pilot still strapped into his seat. He flicked on the ship's console, hacking into the security systems. Encrypted access codes flashed across the screen. Good. The Council's arrogance meant they never expected one of their own ships to be stolen. Callahan cracked the codes in minutes. The ship rumbled to life, engines burning hot as it lifted off, leaving the outpost behind in a storm of dust and fire. But he wasn't leaving the system. Not yet. He had unfinished business. The Council's capital ship. Minutes later, the Galactic Council's capital warship, the Tyrannus, loomed in the void. A massive dreadnought, bristling with weapons, its hull blackened from centuries of war. Inside, the highest-ranking members of the Council sat in their lavish chambers, completely unaware that death was coming for them. Callahan engaged the stolen ship's clearance beacon. No alarms. No suspicion. They let him in. Biggest mistake of their lives. Inside the beast. The moment the ship docked, Callahan moved fast. He slit the throat of the first dock officer before the alien could even speak. The second guard barely had time to draw his weapon before Callahan shot him twice in the head. Silent. Precise. Lethal. He took their uniforms, blending into the ship's corridors. He wasn't here to sabotage. He wasn't here to escape. He was here to gut the Council from the inside. The first kill. The first target was Counselor Valos, a high-ranking war strategist. He was sitting in his quarters, sipping fine Tazarian wine, completely relaxed. The door slid open. Valos barely had time to turn before Callahan put a knife through his chest, twisting until the light left his 4 alien eyes. 1 down. 5 more to go. The slaughter begins. Callahan hunted them like prey. One by one, the most powerful leaders of the Council fell beneath his blade, his bullets, his wrath. Counselor Mal-11, shot in the head while fleeing down a maintenance shaft. Counselor Drextan, strangled with his own ceremonial sash, his lifeless body hung from the war room's balcony for the entire ship to see. Counselor Jarkath, tied to a chair, a grenade shoved into his mouth. The explosion left nothing but a crimson stain on the wall. By the time the alarms finally bled, it was too late. Half the Council was already dead. And Callahan? He was still coming. Final confrontation. The last 3 counselors barricaded themselves in the central war chamber, surrounded by elite honor guards. One of them, Counselor Veshtan, screamed into the comms, desperation thick in his voice. Lock down the ship. Find him. Kill him. Callahan heard every word. He was already inside. With controlled precision, he detonated the emergency power conduits, plunging the war chamber into darkness. Panic erupted. Lights. Restore the damn lights. Then, in the pitch black, Callahan whispered over their comms. You left me to die. They froze. Then, gunfire. Callahan moved through the shadows, picking them off one by one. The honor guards didn't last 2 minutes. Their corpses littered the war room floor. Only the counselors remained. They begged. They offered bribes. They tried to reason with him. Callahan raised his rifle. No mercy. 3 trigger pulls. 3 dead counselors. The broadcast of terror. Callahan wasn't just here for vengeance. He was here to send a message. He activated the ship's main comms beacon, overriding its encryption. The entire Galactic Council's empire would hear his words. As the camera feed flickered on, It showed the dead counselors, their lifeless bodies slumped over their thrones, their blood pooling beneath them. Callahan stepped into frame. "You called us weak," he said, voice steady, ice cold. "You thought one human alone couldn't hurt you." He leaned in, locking eyes with the millions watching across the galaxy. "I am just one." A beat of silence. "Imagine what happens when the rest of us come." Then, he cut the feed. The entire galaxy had just witnessed the impossible. A lone human, left for dead, had just annihilated the most powerful leaders in the universe. Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. That was what Callahan had just planted in the heart of every alien watching. Escaping the inferno. The Tyrannus was in chaos. With its leaders dead, its crew panicking, and its systems compromised, it was only a matter of time before self-destruction protocols kicked in. Callahan moved through the corridors like a ghost, hijacking an escape vessel and blasting away just as the capital warship exploded behind him. One soldier, one warship, one empire-shaking act of revenge. And now? Now the entire Galactic Council was afraid. The legend begins. Back on Earth, when the first reports reached the United Nations Military Command, the room fell into stunned silence. Callahan had gone off the grid for months. They had assumed he was dead. Instead, he had done something no army had ever accomplished. He had single-handedly crippled the Galactic Council's power. And he wasn't done. Somewhere, across the stars, Dean Callahan was still out there. And every alien in the galaxy now knew one thing. Humans don't die easy. And when you try to kill them, they come back as your worst nightmare. The end. Or just the beginning. The Galactic Council had left a wounded American soldier to die. Now they would never forget his name. And Callahan? Callahan was just getting started.